all season, our first post-game chat anyway, with our guy Adam Terry. All right, Adam, so you've seen it all now. You've seen the quad walk and the game and the new seats and everything that went into week one. What hits you the most from the experience this weekend?
Well, I think everything checked the box, right? As far as the play out on the field, you've got a couple guys that you walk away from, and my comments pregame were, hey, I'm excited to see Arade Gadsden come back and Trevor Pena, and those guys came back out and performed exceedingly well. And then you throw a couple of the new pieces in, and that was fantastic to see that, the trigger puller and Kyle McCord and what his capabilities were. So offensively, you come away and you're like, hey, that was good. Defensively, it's kind of one of those where, hey, first live bullets, first time out there, doing their thing, fantastic. But there's room for improvement. And then, that's the game itself. But the key takeaways that I see is, the walk was cool, things like that. But the student section, that was pretty impressive, right? I don't think that's, I don't know if you're talking about it a lot or not, but that place was rocking. And that student section caused a couple miscues for Ohio when they were down at that end. So, as far as everything goes, loved it all, but that student section in the Dome, pretty awesome.
Yeah, because, for those that are unaware of where the student section was, it was kind of behind the end sort of the Syracuse bench. Now they moved the band to the east end zone of the field, and the students are flanking them. So, yeah, it's a different, right? The students, I guess, can have more direct effect with their noise over what's happening on the field than maybe if they're off to the side where they were previously.
Yeah, hands down. And I think as far as a kicker, right, now you're going to have to kick into this orange wave of, students, throwing as many insults and cheering on the orange as much as possible. So, I wouldn't want to be a kicker in there, nor would I want to be a signal caller trying to get relayed information across the board to wide receivers. So, I just thought it was, first week back with students involved and everything. We got to see what the Dome looked like earlier, as far as I did and Matt did as well. We came to a scrimmage, and then you get to see the place pretty full. Pretty cool. It was a good atmosphere, great opportunity to go out there, and Syracuse put together a solid performance.
Yeah, the announced crowd was 37 and change. That's about 5,000 short of what would be a sellout. These days, I imagine we'll get much closer to that number this week. I'll say this, Adam, on TV, the blue seats, they look sharp on TV. It kind of all blends in there. It looks really nice when you're watching the game right now. Let's hit McCord here. So obviously the first series was like, oh my goodness, what just happened here? him coming out, that was wild.
First play.
Yeah. He's like, first pass is going back. His third pass was nearly a pick six. What does it take to mentally, put that in the rear view? Because that can really throw somebody off, and clearly it did not. It did not seem to affect the rest of his day at all.
Yeah, everybody can account for some of those jitters out there. I think for a guy up in the booth watching what occurred, you kind of go, oh. But then, he calmed down. He's got every throw in the book. He throws with a lot of velocity behind the ball, and they spread the football around. So, hey, look, check, can't go any further than that. Check the box right there, and looking forward to see what he can do against tougher competition this week.
He seems really decisive, right? When he back foot first read ball out, the processing of that seems very decisive, right? You add in some of the ball placement, and some good ththings happen when he's going through his procedure like that.
Yeah, everything that he did, eyes were downfield. When he had to run, it looked like they had a couple opportunities where they called a run for him. Scrambling around did well. I think, the success of Kyle McCord, and I said it on air, was just it's going to be up to that offensive line. Mm-hmm. That offensive line can keep him up on his feet, and it's a totally revamped offensive line. Syracuse will be going in that upward trajectory throughout the year. If they can't, it's going to be a long season as far as the capability to throw the ball down the field. So I think you saw at the beginning these using the whole width of the field and, throws underneath 10 yards, and then later on in the game you really saw the potential of getting protected and then launching that ball down the field. And now, when we say that, it's also, too, a couple of those were, pretty close to being on the money, but then there were a couple spectacular plays that were made by the wide receivers. And this is a very small sample, but I think this is our best wide receiver crew that we've seen in a long, long time.
Like, obviously, Gadsden's a tight end, we get it, but obviously we know his deal. He's fantastic, and they didn't have anyone that could guard him at all on Saturday. To get Pena working like that, to get, Zed Haynes working like that, Jackson Meeks had that fantastic catch at one point. How much pressure does that take off of Gadsden when it's not like 2 years ago, right? He was like the only threat in the pass game a couple of years ago. How different can this be for Rondé this year with those other guys around him?
Well, I think you saw it is, he was the guy that when you needed a play, you went to. But then also, Trevor Pena's resurgence coming back off that hamstring injury and just watching him with his speed run around the field. It used to be a factor of there wasn't a lot of speed out on the field, and a guy like Trevor Pena was the guy that really showed his speed out there. But then you start to look through the lineup and watch these guys run around, and you still have other players that are, Justice Ross Simmons, who's sitting on the bench right now, have proven themselves at a high level. So you love everything that Rondé can do. You saw him put his hand down, and he was blocking a little bit more than you did last year. Well, we didn't see much of him last year. So that we've seen him in an orange uniform block, and it's really fun to watch. I mean, Gadsden is, I think, for a Syracuse fan, you have to take him and look at him and say, okay, well, he's a generational talent. You don't see a guy come in here like that one has stayed with the landscape of college football right now. He stayed and he's performing, and he believes in what this coaching staff under Fran Brown is trying to get accomplished. So, ton of fun to watch. Great kid from everything that I've seen. Every interaction I've ever had with him, he's been a great guy.
I'll echo that sentiment, Adam. He's always been gracious with his time, handles it like a pro. That makes sense because of his dad. He's freaking huge. He's 6'5", he's 240 right now. How do you guard this guy, especially when there are other options? I don't know what you do right now if you're a defense with him, considering, the variety of places he can show up.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough one to guard him throughout the season. I just remember one of the deep balls that was thrown to him. Probably the safety came down and put a licking on him. But it was also probably 200 pounds on 240 pounds. Yeah. And a guy that's trying to make it to the next level and has that athletic prowess to go up there and bring that ball down. And he was a big-bodied guy, and it looked like, one of those little Pop Warner things where the big guy just kind of runs through and the little guy falls down. And, I think it's going to be tough to contain him. Yes, he might be limited in some capacities, maybe double coverage or bracketed, whatever that would be. But now that Syracuse has more than one weapon, and a guy like Trevor Pena comes into play, and some of the other guys get rolling out at that wide receiver position, it's going to be he himself puts defenses in a bind. But then with this surrounding cast of characters right now, it's going to be even tougher.
Yeah, because you do have other options. If Pena can, he's not going to have 3 touchdowns, in other games, but if he can remotely replicate what he did and, Zed Haynes stretching the field, you got a little something going right there. And LeQuint being active out of the backfield as well. We got Adam Terry with us here on a Monday, as we do every week. I'd say the one thing that threw me off, okay, you knew you had McCord, you want to throw the ball a little bit. I was kind of surprised the order it happened confident. I thought we might see more LeQuinn early. He ended up having a nice game anyway. What'd you make of does that tell you anything that it was maybe pass first then run this game, or do you think that could change in a game-by-game situation?
I think it's going to be whatever the defense, is willing to give up. And in a situation like this, normally, the thought process behind a running team, like a Georgia Tech, for instance, Georgia Tech's going to come at you and they're going to run the football, and then that opens up the pass game. And for some other instances, a kid like Haynes King can scramble, or they have design runs for him. So I think initially it was Syracuse getting out there and feeling it out. What are they going to allow? There's different personnel out there. They hadn't seen some of the personnel with 26 transfers that occurred at Ohio. You're kind of, who knew about Tyus, the running back, at one point? Everybody knows he's on the national map now. But it was feel out what's going to happen. How are they defending things? And later on, as they started throwing the ball downfield, the ability to open the run game with taking the pressure off from the linebacker depth and removing that a little bit allowed for success for LeQuinn. And I think it's still, I really like the nuts and bolts and the parts that Syracuse has, and I think as this offensive line matures and progresses, they're going to be able to establish the run early and then allow for that run to turn into play action or deeper throws.
Yeah, even so, LeQuinn ends up going 98 yards and 15 carries, 4 catches as well. A very solid game in the opener. Let's hit the D here, and unfortunately we got to start with the injury to Marlo Wax. Sounds like a minimum he's going to be down for half the season here, Adam. How big of a blow is that? I mean, we've watched Marlo play. He's the middle linebacker. He's the communicator. How big of a loss is this for the Orange defense?
I think it's huge. He was the longest tenured player. I think it was his 40th career start, which is incredible, and the emotional leader. I don't think there's anything that words can't express what Marlo Wax means to that team and the glue that he was in the middle, and then him as a person, but then also him as the middle linebacker. You started to see it looked as though Justin Barron, it went from Marlo Wax to Justin Barron with a green dot.
Yep.
And it seemed as though it stressed Barron a little bit as that play caller going from the outside into the middle, trying to relay information. But, as a human being, Marlo's always been a stand-up guy whenever I've come in contact with him. I know what he means to the players. You could see the emotion he had coming off of the field in tears. But, I just hope for him he has an opportunity at that next level. And this is a shorter time that he's off the field, but only the doctors really know about that one right now.
Yeah, or we'll have to play the waiting game on that, and it's kind of twofold here. You mentioned Barron, so one, you have to replace him at linebacker, and two, you have to replace the communication. And you saw the Barron part was a little wonky this week, just because. Literally Marlo was in the middle of the field every play. Barron's all over the freaking place. I do wonder, Adam, what do you think they do here? Do you keep it with Barron because he's a veteran guy, or are you trying to coach up whoever's, be it a Hurd or be it Anwar Sparrow, you're trying to coach up someone else just because they are stepping into that role, which is middle linebacker?
I think in a pinch it was the emergency break glass, and that went to Justin Barron, but also to, after watching it, it seemed to slow Barron down, and to move it into a guy like Hurd who played well towards, once he got his opportunity. But, I think it has to go back into that middle so that, if they're signaling things in, the secondary is going to be able to absorb it. And it just frees Barron back up. It looked like he was a little bit encumbered by having that on and having to relay information from what I would say would be the outside in. If he's walking out to the slot, coming back in and trying to relay, I don't think it was the most advantageous thing for him. So putting in the green dot on somebody in the middle, I think going forward long long term to get them acclimated, but then also to allow others to play free.
Yeah, especially it's literally the first year this communication is allowed, so there's not like a whole history to rely on with this. It'll be kind of fascinating to watch how they handle that this week and going forward. All right, Adam, wrapping up, it's Georgia Tech this week, and they got the Florida State win from a couple weeks ago. You look around the league this week, besides Miami, just absolutely thumping Florida. Like nothing really stood out in a major way to me. Like, this feels like suddenly week 2 here. Like this is a pretty big early season game to actually make some noise in this league right now.
I mean, it's huge. You're coming off of, going over to Dublin, squeaking out a win, having the ability to run the football, right? Like they were able to run the football, and they do it. Mm-hmm. They do it in a matter of they're running counter a lot of times, and they're building an extra runner with Haynes King, the quarterback. He's a top-notch guy, and I think that game expressed it. And then they go last week and beat up on a fellow team within Georgia there, and now moving up into the Dome, it's travel, has the wear and tear of travel added up to Dublin game. Has that started to take effect to them or not, right? Like, I think Georgia Tech can run the football. We had our issues last week with running the football, and also Parker Navarro scrambling around and making plays as the quarterback. Haynes King is notches above him as a quarterback in that quarterback play, whether the ability to run or throw the ball downfield. So, I'm looking forward to a good game. I think this is one where you start to create the mentality of what Fran Brown has tried to establish, right? Bigger guys, physical, lean on people, and we're 1 year behind Georgia Tech because that was the same playbook that Keys had taken and started to implement at Georgia Tech.
He likes that idea too, and he's an old offensive line coach, so he's all about having some big guys up front to lean on you. So it'll be fascinating to watch. We'll hear Adam over on TK all day long on Saturday, coming up with a noon kick coverage certainly before and after as well. All right, Adam, thanks, man. Have a good week. We'll talk to you again next Monday.
All right, sounds like a